And it's not going to happen. So we have a situation today when we look at Afghanistan, we have to ask ourselves the question, if we went to Afghanistan in the first place to fight Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda by and large is no longer in Afghanistan, why do we have to continue this kind of war, counterinsurgency, that is not going to lead to any kind of victory? There is going to be no sign of mission accomplished now or next year or 2 years or 5 years down the line. So we will have to settle, we'll have to reach for a solution that it is far more practical. And the solution, in fact, if there's anything to be copied, to be duplicated from Iraq, is basically trying to co-opt the insurgency. And in Afghanistan in particular, these are people, indigenous people. This is their life. This is how they live. And we are not going to be able to kill every single Taliban. And therefore, we have to look for a solution. And the solution is going to require, of necessity, co-opting the Taliban's movement and work out some kind of a political arrangement whereby we can live with. And I know, today the effort, and if you heard General Petraeus just recently said, yes, we're probably going to have to do so, but first we need to weaken the Taliban to a point where if we decapitate much of their leadership, they'll be forced now to come and to the negotiating table and agree to some kind of a political resolution. The truth of the matter is that kind of position, disregard the mindset, the psychological mindset of the Afghani people. And I don't think 10 years down the line we understand their mindset yet. To begin with, the Afghani movement, the Taliban, the insurgency, are not unified group of people. And there's a central command, and everybody and there's a hierarchy, and everybody follows certain rules and regulation. That is not the case at all. They go also by their instinct. It's very diffused campaign that they wage against the United States. Which in fact, as I turn in a moment to the collection of information, that makes it so much more difficult, because we cannot really get a piece of information that is applicable to other groups for that matter, other Talibani in different kind of locations. So what we need to think in terms of how do we co-opt them? And instead of trying to subdue them or force some kind of a quote-unquote surrender, which they will not accept, we have to make it abundantly clear from the very beginning that the solution lies in a political approach, not in a military approach, and that the United States will be prepared to sit down and negotiate with the Taliban in one form or another. But not necessarily, and in fact, it will be far more counterproductive if we try first to eliminate their leadership in order to force the rank and file to come to the negotiating table. They will not accept that, they will resent that, and in fact, the more we do of that, the more resistance we are going to be facing. If we accept this premise and decide that our approach will have to be focused on counterterrorism, then the United States has a significant role to play, because we are threatened by various terrorist organizations, in particular the Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda is not, as I said earlier, it's in Afghanistan. But before I turn to the solution, how I see it, I'd like to mention to you some of the problems that we've been facing in collecting of the intelligence in Afghanistan, because this is just to tell us why it hasn't been working and what can be done and how can we shift now our focus. To begin with, immediately after the defeat of the Taliban in 2002 and 2003, what we found, we pretty much left Afghanistan, our focus shifted to Iraq. And we have created a major vacuum. A vacuum was specifically pronounced more so in the intelligence gathering than anything else. So it was We had no consistency in the collection of intelligence from the various sources that have been available to us. That was one of the biggest impediments that we have experienced and will continue to experience into this very day. The second thing that we have to keep in mind is the lack of a human intelligence. Now, lack of human intelligence, it's easier, it's so significant because no matter, and let me repeat this to you, no matter how sophisticated our electronic devices we have to collect intelligence through various means, listening devices, by drones, by any, and I can tell you there's a very long list of electronic means by which we can collect intelligence. But nothing is as effective as the real-time intelligence that is being gathered by human intelligence. And we do not have that. We do not have that in Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, since the end of the Cold War, once the United States, we felt, well, we have won the Cold War, we pretty much cut much of the budget for human intelligence going back nearly 20 years. And we haven't really been able to put back that into motion in a very strong way to this very day. But in Afghanistan in particular, it's extraordinarily difficult to get people to spy. Let me just give you a couple of examples. This is a tribal area. Tribal area is a very close-knit communities. No one can go into a tribal area without being recognized almost immediately. Which means you cannot recruit people from the outside and send them into the tribal area to gather information. What is even worse than that, you cannot get individuals from the tribal area to spy on their tribes, on their communities, because traditionally, culturally, they resist, they are very skeptical, they are very suspicious of any foreigners to begin with. That is embedded in their soul, in their very culture. And it is extraordinarily difficult to find somebody who is going to be recruited from within, go back to his or her community in order to spy on their community. Extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible. And so that eliminate, by and large, much of our ability to collect information through human intelligence that give us the real-time information that we desperately need. The third or fourth point is this, as I said earlier, there's the factionalism within the Taliban community. And that is, in terms of intelligence, a piece of information that you can get about a certain Taliban group in a certain area is not necessarily applicable to another area. That is, the fact that they operate in such diffused manner without central authority makes also the use of the intelligence we receive about certain group or certain activities is very, very limited. And that also has quite a bit impeded our effort. Then, of course, there is the language barrier. I don't think I can overemphasize to you the importance of this issue of the language barrier in the collection of data. Because here we have to depend on interpreters. Interpreters who are 99% are Afghani people. And the interpreters, many of them have their own agenda. Either inadvertently they misinterpret the question or the answer, or deliberately they will ask the wrong question in order to get the kind of answer that you want to hear. That is one of the biggest problems with interpreters. But even a bigger issue with that, the Taliban, knowing that we depend on interpreter to gather information, they managed to make sure that some of these interpreters are actually of their own. And so what you have interpreters who actually, within an hour, report precisely what was the questions all about, what we wanted to find out, back to their leadership. So this has been a problem that we haven't been really able to overcome to this very day. Then you have a question of to what extent have we been able to use open source information. Now, open source, anyone sitting in this room knows that perhaps better than 60–70% of general intelligence, a collection of intelligence, could come from open source. Just by way of example, I'll tell you why open source is not even working well in Afghanistan. Some of you, and I don't think I'm revealing any secret about the Mossad operation when it comes to open sources. What sort of operation?